Good evening, United Baptist. We're right now as a country in a moment of waiting, something that we're not good at, are we? We don't like to wait. We don't like to wait for waiters even. We don't like to wait in line. We don't like to wait on the phone. We want to find out results now. And yet, for so many people, we don't really know what's going to happen. I talked a little bit about this upcoming election this last Sunday. And by the way, I want to encourage you, if you've not had a chance to hear that message, you can go to our church website. It's called The Great King, and you can go and listen to that and find out more about some thoughts I had going into the election that I hope will be a blessing. But right now, we're in that moment of waiting. And many people predicted that we wouldn't know the full results of the election on Tuesday or even Wednesday, and that has turned out to be correct. Now, I want to talk this evening about waiting, because there's a powerful work that God does in our hearts when we have to wait. It can teach us a lot about ourselves. It can teach us a lot about the circumstance that we're in. And by the way, it can teach us a lot about who God is and how He can work in our own lives. David was somebody who knew a lot about waiting. God had promised him the kingdom, and he had to wait a while before that actually happened. And in Psalm 62, we find the chapter of chapters when it comes to waiting. And it's not because it's so long, it's because of its focus on waiting upon God. In verse number 5 of Psalm 62, it says, "My soul, wait thou only upon God, for my expectation is from Him." There's a lot of truth in this verse. David is in reality telling himself, wait on God. And he does this because we don't like to wait on God, do we? We like to make the result happen. And we will insert ourselves into a situation. We will try to figure out how to make a situation happen the way we want it to. So we don't like to wait on God. We don't like to let Him work, because I think if we're really being honest, a lot of us have a lot more trust in ourselves than we do in God. And I can say that because we see how we react to situations when they don't happen the way we do, and the way we want it. So we will do things to try to get that result. So, we'll become worried about a situation and fret over it, or we'll try to change the outcome of something because we can't wait on God. David here says that he is going to wait on God, but he says this also. He says, wait on God alone. Wait thou only upon God, which is interesting. What he's really saying is trust in God for this outcome. Trust in God on what He is going to do. And it was a little bit of what I talked about on Sunday, which is providence, believing that God is in control, that the decisions that are happening, ultimately God is working out for good. And that's really what kind of David is saying there. Wait thou only upon God. What he's really saying is trust in God. And when you can trust in God, it's okay to wait. When you believe God and His providence, you're okay waiting, because you know that He is in control. This psalm is really talking about the waiting that happens when we are in trouble, or when we're perplexed, when we don't know what to do. And oftentimes when we're in those situations, it drives us to worry. And we fret about things, we start to wonder what's going to happen, and we lose the peace that God gives to us so freely. Sometimes we'll decide to fix the problem, and David, in this moment, he quiets himself. David, if you read about his life, sometimes he did try to go and fix the problem himself, and it didn't work out well. But when he waited on God, when he allowed God to work, he saw amazing results. The truth is this: we are great at taking a bad situation and making it worse, aren't we? We decide, okay, I got to fix this. I got to fix this part of the relationship. I've got to fix this situation, and we actually just make it worse. And what we can often find is that when we're troubled, when we decide just to go it ourselves and we don't wait on God to do a work in our own life and in others, it can almost be like quicksand. You're told that if you get into quicksand, you shouldn't try to run your way out of it because it's just going to make you sink faster, that it's better to be as still as possible. And there's a lot of truth to that when it comes to problems and just the ability to be patient in difficulties. Oftentimes when we try to interject ourselves and get our way, we only make things worse. Jeremiah 17 verse 5 says this, "Thus saith the Lord, Cursed be the man that trusteth in man, and maketh flesh his arm, and whose heart departeth from the Lord." This is that very aspect of, I'm going to do things my own way. I don't need to wait on God. I don't need to get direction from God. I already know what to do. And these things curse us in our life. They curse the results that we're trying to see because we're looking to do things without God's help. On the other side of it, you have Psalm 46:10, which says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth." See, in times of trouble, in times of bewilderment, in times of worry, one of the greatest things that Christians can do for themselves and to be a testimony to other people is just to be still and trust God, to know that He is in control. Let me read you a little bit more of Psalm 62. It starts out this way, "Truly my soul waiteth upon God, for Him cometh my salvation. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be greatly moved." Then he goes on to speak about those that were doing evil. He says, "How long will ye imagine mischief against a man? Ye shall be slain, all of you. As a bowing wall shall ye be, and as a tottering fence. They only consult to cast him down from his excellency. They delight in lies. They bless with their mouth, but they curse inwardly." Selah. David here is talking about a hypocrisy that he sees within those that are attacking him. But he also says that even though this is going on and they're saying the right things, but inwardly there's all these problems, he said, "I'm trusting in God and I'm waiting on Him to be the one that gives a victory." And this is really important because David's saying, I can wait on God because I know He is a God of justice. Human beings everywhere cry out for justice, for their nation, for themselves, for people they love. And human beings often get justice wrong. There are decisions that are made that are just not just, they're not right, and they hurt people. But yet we know that God is righteous and that ultimately all things will be dealt with. And so David here can rest in that knowledge. Nobody gets away ultimately with anything. No one gets away with anything in secret. The Bible does say we reap what we sow. And God makes a promise for those kind of things. He goes on to say this, "My soul, wait thou only upon God, for my expectation is from Him. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be moved. And God is my salvation and my glory, the rock of my strength, and my refuge is in God. Trust in Him at all times. Ye people, pour out your heart before Him. God is a refuge for us. Selah." There's such an earnestness, a pouring out of his heart to God, and encouraging other people to do the same, where he says, put your trust in God. He's your rock. And not only that, he talks about pouring out our hearts to God. I think this is really important. People oftentimes spend far more worrying about an issue, gossiping about an issue, grumbling about an issue within themselves. They spend all that time rather than pouring out their heart to God. And what happens is because they're so focused on these human ways of dealing with problems, they never get any type of spiritual healing. It's worry, it's grumbling, it's criticism, it's gossip, it's all of these things rather than going to God and pouring out your heart to Him. And here's the truth. You can go to God and you can tell Him whatever you want. He already knows where your heart is. I think sometimes people, they pray to God and they're like, I have to use all the right words, almost like God can't see their heart. You know, if you read the Psalms, you find David was pretty honest with God about how he felt. Times when he was angry, when he was frustrated, even at God. But what you notice in the Psalms is that as David was honest before God, he was able then to also do a work in his heart and bring him to a place that I would say was healthy, spiritually and emotionally. We should be able to go to God and talk with Him and be sincere about what's going on. And there's nothing wrong with that because, like I said, God already knows our heart as it is. But people would rather oftentimes gossip or grumble within themselves or worry than just go to God and pour out their heart to Him. And David here stresses, he says, trust in Him at all times, ye people, pour out your heart before Him. See, I think that's another part of it. If you're willing to be honest with God, a lot of times hand in hand, it shows that you're willing to trust Him too. And that's important. Because when we are troubled, when we don't know what's going to happen and we have to wait on God, we need to be willing to pray and talk with God as we would anybody else. And so here, David encourages that. You know, I remember listening one time to a pastor who said, you know, a lot of times when he's troubled and he's got problems going on, he'll open up to the book of Psalms and he will keep reading a psalm until his spirit is right. He said, I just keep reading until finally my spirit gets to the right place, when I'm worried, when I'm distressed. And what good advice that is. So often we turn to all of these other things rather than God and His Word when we are upset about something or troubled about something. And that's why people don't wait on God anymore. That's why it's not God that gives us peace. And all across America today, there are people that are, you know, pulling their hairs out because they can't wait on God. And we should always be in prayer for our nation. We should always be in prayer for our government leaders. And we shouldn't, though, ever lose our trust in God. And people around us should never look at us and say, well, those people aren't trusting God. They say they're Christians, but it doesn't look like they're trusting Him. And so I want to urge you this evening to steel yourself. Turn off the TV. Stop checking the internet all the time and spend some time in God's Word. Allow God to settle your soul, to be at peace. God is ultimately a God of justice, and He's ultimately in control. He works in ways that we don't understand, but we know that He works all things together for good to them that love Him. And I appreciate how David ends this psalm. He says, surely men of low degree are vanity, and men of high degree are a lie. To be laid in the balance, they are altogether lighter than vanity. This verse is saying God doesn't respect persons. It doesn't matter where you're at on the social strata. God's going to treat you as an individual. And then it goes on, trust not in oppression and become not vain in robbery. If riches increase, set not your heart upon them. He's really talking to people that have power or riches. Say, you need to understand, anything you have is ultimately God's allowed that. He's the one that owns everything, really. And all power comes from Him. So don't put your trust in that. And then he says, God hath spoken once, twice have I heard this, that power belongeth unto God. Also unto thee, O Lord, belongeth mercy. For thou renderest to every man according to his work. A powerful verse. You know, sometimes we need to remember to be merciful to others because we need mercy too. We oftentimes want to call down judgment on others, but also then ask for mercy for ourselves. And we need to understand that in all of these things, we should be glad we have a merciful God because we need it ourselves. And again, that's another reason why we can wait upon God, because we know that ultimately God always will make the right decision, and He's in control. He knows the end from the beginning, and we know how it all ends too. So I want to encourage you this evening, open up your Bible, spend some time, pray, and allow God to do a work in your heart so that when people look at you, they see somebody who is waiting on God and whose peace and joy is in Him. Thanks so much for listening. God bless.